Hey, everybody. Mike Rollins here with another in my series of interviews with chair for candidates for chair of the Texas Democratic Party. This afternoon, we are joined again, technically, by Patsy Woods Martin. Say hi, Patsy.
Hi, everyone.
So, full disclosure, we actually did an interview last week, but due to technical difficulties on my end, which I confess may have been operator error, yeah, it happens. It didn't get recorded. So Patsy has been gracious enough, and I do emphasize gracious enough to take time out of her schedule to do this again. So I really appreciate it. Thanks, Patsy.
My pleasure.
As I have said on a number of these other interviews, I just want to say it again. Against the backdrop of all the craziness that is happening in Washington right now, um, this and even the stuff that's happening in Austin with the legislature, this exercise in selecting a new state chair feels almost a little bit surreal, um, but and just a little bit internally focused. But as evidenced by the 200 or 300 people who showed up at a forum in Grand Prairie a couple of weeks ago, our grassroots Democrats are paying attention and they think this race is important to the future of the state. So that's why I'm taking time to do these interviews. That's why these candidates are running. And that's why I think it was very important to let other SDEC members as well as constituents have a better feel for who these candidates are. So again, Patsy, thanks for being here today. I will, so I've started off on some of these others, give you just a brief introduction to Patsy. Patsy Woods Martin is a rancher, proud Texan, and lifelong Democrat. Over the past decade, Patsy has raised more than $30 million for Democratic candidates and causes across Texas, which, if you've ever done any fundraising, you know that's not easy. From 2014 to 2018, she was the executive director of Annie's List, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. In 2020, Patsy founded and organized the Texas House Majority PAC to provide early funding for state House races. And if you've been in politics very long, you know how important that early funding is. In 2022, Patsy served as finance chair for the launch of Beto O'Rourke's gubernatorial campaign. She is running for chair of the TDP because she's ready to hit the ground running on day one to set up our party to win elections and in 2026 and beyond. And you can learn more about Patsy, her platform, and endorsements at patsyintexas.com. So welcome back, Patsy. Again, thanks for doing this again. I think you just froze up on me. Okay, well, we just lost Patsy for a minute. I think the gremlins are just determined to mess this interview up. We'll see if we can get through it.
We're going to persevere.
Yes. Just like Democrats need to do in Texas.
Yeah.
So I know from our previous conversation that you are from the Lubbock area originally, at least you went to Texas Tech. So I've always been curious, where is the divide for the folks who live out there? Where's the dividing line between West Texas and the Panhandle?
Oh gosh, I think about Canyon, probably
Okay.
where it breaks, and Lubbock is considered the South Plains, uh,
Okay, that's fair enough.
and
Yeah.
then the Panhandle is about Canyon and north.
So Amarillo, Dalhart, Doom is definitely the Panhandle.
You got it.
Okay, and then you get down maybe past Midland, Odessa, Van Horn, you're in West Texas.
Yeah, you're in the Permian Basin there.
Oh yeah, Midland. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
And for another little bit of Texas lore, where she lives now is not Montague County, as in Romeo and Juliet. It is
Well, yeah, I mean, it probably really is Montague County, but if you say it that way, people know you're not from there, right?
Yeah, just like if you're from that city, that town in East Texas. My dog wants to get a word in. If you're from that town in East Texas, you're from Palestine, not Palestine.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So you tell me you're in Austin today, meeting with the AFL-CIO.
Right.
So how'd that go?
It was a good meeting. I worked alongside a lot of those folks when I was at Annie's List.
Hmm.
So it was a catch up. And let's
Good,
talk about where we're going to take the Texas Democratic Party into the future.
great. Well, I'm glad that candidates are making and renewing those kinds of connections. So you are Bongo, chill. Yorkies have to make up for their size with their voices, and he's definitely filling that model. Um, you just hope the doorbell doesn't ring. I had a friend when we had two Yorkers who could have swore that the dogs were wired to the doorbell because as soon as it rang, they just yeah, dogs. Anyway, you are one of the few candidates for this position that has taken the effort to really lay out your plans on your website for what you plan to do. So if you would please, do you mind kind of going over, high level, medium level, however you want to handle it, of what you have in mind for what you think our problems are and where you think we really need to go?
Sure. I think the first thing we need to do is rebuild trust and demonstrate value of the Texas Democratic Party. And I think that starts with uh, communication. It starts with transparency and then accountability, holding ourselves accountable, and then communicating some more. I think that is foundational to everything we need to do, and it starts from the inside and works its way out. I want to be sure that our state Democratic Executive Committee is in fact the board of directors for the Texas Democratic Party. And so focusing on rebuilding that relationship and that culture to make sure that it is the SDEC that's setting policy for our party. And I see that as a huge role of the chair. I think the next thing we have to do is maybe even at the same time is take the offense when it comes to messaging. We are right now in the middle of a legislative session where the right-wing Republicans who are in power are doing things that actually devastate Texans' lives.
Mhm.
The most high profile right now is the impending passage of school vouchers,
Right.
which we all know will destroy our public schools. And we need to be telling Texans in very plain, concrete terms what these vouchers will do to their school districts. So I'd like to see the Democratic Party really take, again, an offensive approach, proactive approach when it comes to talking to Texans about what's going on in our state right now.
Right.
Um, then as party chair, I believe that it is the role of the party chair to be the major fundraiser and
Hmm.
secure of resources so that we can actually implement programs to win elections. And I see a lot of my time devoted to telling our story, to inviting folks to partner with us by sharing their time, talent, and treasure
Mhm.
so that we can execute a plan to win elections come November 2026.
Right. So I think from my conversations with the other candidates, and what they've said in the forums, with a few exceptions, I think most would kind of agree with what you've laid out here. Um, in your mind, What do you bring to the table that differentiates you, that makes you more able to deliver on what you're talking about?
I have a history of doing all those things.
Okay,
I came into the executive director position at Annie's List,
right.
uh, where
At
I,
at a very difficult time, I should add, for those who don't
yes,
remember, was the executive director and one of the assistants got killed in a car crash during the 2014 cycle, and you were on the board then and stepped up and took over the job.
that's correct. Yeah. That was 2014. It was June of 2014.
Right.
We had made significant commitments to people like Wendy Davis and Leticia Vandepute, who were running at the top of the ticket, in addition to women who were running for state senate and the legislature. And we were able to, wrap our arms around our grieving team and help them get to work and focus on the future and actually meet those commitments to the women that we had endorsed in that election cycle. So in doing that, I didn't do it alone. I worked alongside a board of directors uh, to do that. We built relationships over the course of time all around the state. We had organizing bodies in El Paso, McAllen, San Antonio, Austin, Houston, Dallas, and Fort Worth, and built relationships all around the state. And then I have built a career both professionally and as a volunteer as a fundraiser. I know how to build a team that can raise millions of dollars. I've done it in the past, and I would love to work with the team we have in place at the party and to build it to do just that for Texas Democrats.
So in looking at the appeal, the support for some of the other candidates, um, what people have told me is, or pattern I seem to have observed as well, is Kendall Scudder is from East Texas, lives in the Dallas area now, seems to have a natural base of support among folks in East Dallas and uh, East Texas especially, but in a lot of the smaller counties too. Lily Schechter, I haven't found anybody outside of Harris County, I mean, inside Harris County, who had anything negative to say about her. Everybody just loves Lily in Harris County.
Mhm.
Uh, People in other parts of the state don't know much about her, though. So you don't have those two natural consistencies, but the thing everybody does mention about you is your fundraising background. And that's what they find attractive. So I know you've had a lot of fundraising experience in not just politics, but also in the public, what private nonprofit sector. So could you talk a little bit about that too?
Yeah. So I was a fundraiser at United Way in Central Texas. I started at actually the bottom of the fundraising department, and I worked myself up to the vice president of resource development at United Way in Austin. Um, and in that role, I led a team of about 12 to 15 full-time people and then another 10 seasonal people to raise about $18 million every year for nonprofits around Central Texas. And then while I was at United Way, we began to look at an effort to democratize with a small d philanthropy in Central Texas and started an effort called I Live Here, I Give Here. I ended up leaving United Way to drive that effort forward. And one of the programs that I Live Here, I Give Here has is called Amplify Austin, which is a digital giving program that has generated about, let's see, they just had their latest Amplify Austin and raised almost $10 million. So about $128 million in giving over the course of one day a year for about 10, 11 or 12 years. So I have worked with donors from the very grassroots level with these digital sustaining gifts all the way to major donors. I have worked to build a fundraising program and implement it and actually, engage folks in giving.
That is a pretty extensive background, especially considering some of the other folks running. Um, I do like to give people a little more of a feel for the candidate's background and how they got into this current role. So in a previous conversation, I'd ask you, uh, you said you did go to Texas Tech and you had majored in chemistry or something like that.
I
And
did.
you moved to the Houston area and worked for some firms associated with petroleum industry.
That's right. Yeah. So I graduated from Texas Tech with a BA in chemistry, and went to work on the ship channel
Mhm.
as a chemist. While I was in Houston, I worked for two different oil field service companies. One took sort of the wastewater from oil production and cleaned that up, and the other made surfactants that the petrochemical industry used in drilling.
Okay. And then when you got married, you moved to Austin and
Mhm.
got into all of the other stuff you had mentioned then.
Yeah, that's right. I moved to Austin, did a lot of different things before I had kids, was able to stay home for a few years with kids. Actually did a lot of volunteer work on Democratic campaigns at that time. And then went to work at United Way when my kids were older.
Right. And one of the comments that, again, one of the reasons I do this is people know the candidates better. Somebody had mentioned that they thought you were just another old Republican woman. And somebody had mentioned to me that, well, no, far from that. She was back passing the chicken bucket for bucks for Ann Richards.
Yeah. Well, yeah, even before Ann Richards, I worked as a volunteer riding through East Texas
Mm.
uh, for a gubernatorial candidate, a meeting with county chairs, getting our pictures on the front page of the weekly newspaper to build awareness of that campaign and that race. And then I worked at the Austin Women's Center,
Mm.
uh,
Mhm.
where County Commissioner Ann Richards was on the board of directors. And as a result of that, volunteered when she was county commissioner to help her build her voter file. And back then it looked like 3x5 cards in a Tupperware bread box.
Yeah, I actually got into it and I would had my own access database that I created for my precinct. So, maybe a generation two after you started, but still before Van.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, I really feel like I've done everything again, the campaign caravans, the building voter files. When I was at Annie's List, I went to El Paso to knock on doors in Clint, Texas for
Mm.
Marianne Perez when she was in a big fight to hold her seat for a second term. I sat in the in the auto workers uh, hall making phone calls for Terry Mesa when
Ah,
she
okay.
was trying to win her seat in Irving.
Hmm.
I poll greeted for Annie's List candidates in San Antonio. So I've seen Democratic politics from lots of different angles.
So you've seen it from just about every angle other than actually holding a party office, which is one of the concerns that some people have raised.
Mhm. Yeah, I really have never been in a rules fight. Um, and
I've been in some that I would just as soon not have been in.
so if I'm elected, I would look to party insiders to work with me to make sure that that I play the role that I need to play as party chair. I certainly understand Robert's Rules of Order. I've chaired boards and managed boards. But instead of doing that, really, I've worked within the Democratic ecosystem to support candidates and PACs. And I would say, while I was at Annie's List, I worked right alongside party staff
Right.
when it came to recruiting candidates, especially. I sat on the van, I don't know, committee board because Annie's List uh, paid the Democratic Party of Texas $25,000 every cycle
Right.
to have access to van and to be able to make sure that van was as improved ongoing as we could make it. So
Right.
I like to say I'm a well-informed outsider when it comes to the Texas Democratic Party.
Okay, that's fair enough. Um, there was something else I was going to ask you about along those lines. Oh, what I was going to mention is, I was a county chair for 8 years. I had been telling people that I thought, and just full disclosure, most people who have been there will agree with me that there's nothing like being a county chair, especially in a Democratic Party in a red or purple leaning county in Texas. There's no other
Mhm.
job like it. And I used to say that I thought the state party chair would be even harder than county chair. But I had a couple of people tell me that no, their opinion it would be that being the county chair would be harder than being state chair. So if that's true, then it might not be as much of a liability for you as others
There's
may
no
think.
politics like local politics, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um,
And I
yeah,
understand that. And I see the role of the state party as making these county party chairs' jobs a little bit easier.
right. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about county chairs and stuff in a minute. At least I hope we have time. One of the things that you have mentioned a lot being a concern, uh, and not just fundraising, but the broader topic of the TDP's current financial state. I think maybe a lot of people, and including me, I didn't really know this until I dug around a few weeks ago. That the state party is currently in debt to the figure of 300,000 or so. Probably 150,000 of that is carried over from get conventions. And I think it was primarily from the 22 convention when the corporate sponsors decided they weren't going to support anybody, and that kind of left a hole in our finances. There's another chunk of money that is, I think, owed to the party's general counsel, and we're not sure how much of that is going to be declared a in-kind donation versus actually repaid. But you could raise some concerns just about really wanting to understand the whole financial picture, the income, the outgo, and whatnot. And I think that's particularly timely in the fact that the other thing we're going to be doing March 29th is approving a budget. There was a meeting, gosh, I think it was just this last Monday night. Time is flying these days, where the SDEC was given its first look at the budget, which this is a long-standing issue for a lot of us. You probably are aware that up until a few years ago, we didn't even get to look at the budget or financial statements on the SDEC, which for board of directors just blows my mind, and I'm sure it blows yours. I think we've made some progress in that we're actually getting a look at the budget before we vote on it. What a concept. But what does concern me is this wasn't an overall exercise where even through committees, we sat down, did a plan, and figured out what budget we need to support all the things we want to do. It looks to be a budget that staff put together to continue operations pretty much in the current mode without much extra added
Mhm.
on to it, maybe a few other initiatives. So
Mhm.
in that context, I wonder if you could comment about, the whole priority budget process, what you plan to do with how we spend and raise our money should you get elected and whatnot.
Well, I would approach the whole development of the budget, uh, the process for that very differently than what I assume how it's been approached now. My experience with other boards is that um, the boards set the policy, set the direction for the organization, and the budget is simply a document that uh, really talks about how that policy is going to be implemented. Um, on other boards that I've worked with, um, the board has an input before the budget is completely developed. I would want to have budget meetings with at least the finance committee at the very beginning uh, to to ensure that the SDEC as the board of directors priorities are funded. Then, of course, staff has got to take that and refine it. And then I think only then it comes back to the finance committee and the full board. The other thing that I haven't seen the budget in its entirety, I've only seen sort of summaries of it, but I don't see any revenue projections uh, in the budgets that I've seen. It's all been expense.
That's a good point. I think I'm going to have to go back and look.
Yeah, and if I've missed it, please let me know. But um, you know, you've got to have a plan to fund the work that you're going to do.
Right,
And so I would never propose a budget to the SDEC that didn't have a plan for funding it.
right.
And that's another way that I would approach this whole thing differently.
I think, I mean, before we leave the topic of fundraising, I think anybody who's ever done larger dollar donations as opposed to, just small dollar mass communication stuff, uh, knows that just like in politics, the basis of significant fundraising is all personal relationships. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you have developed those relationships and your other roles, the kind of relationships you have, and how you might leverage those to help the party.
Yeah. Yeah. So, when you're fundraising, you have to start with a compelling reason to give.
Mm.
And so I would work with the team, and that means staff and SDEC, to make sure we've developed a compelling reason to give. And then I would go and look for partners that want to invest in the work we propose to do. I think we have to approach it on all levels. I think we have to have a digital program. I think we have to have a sustaining giving program. And then I think we need to look at how we match the interests of donors with the work we want to do. Um, And so I would take the work that the party plans to do to current donors, to prospective donors, to folks I have relationships with both in the state and outside the state, and invite them to partner with us on programs rather than give to the Democratic Party of Texas because it's a good thing.
Okay.
My approach is, here is the work we're going to do, be it voter protection, be it vote by mail and chase, be it county party support. Here are our programs. What do you, Mr. Prospective partner, think is most important? And how would you like to invest in the work of the Texas Democratic Party? And then, almost more importantly than securing the gift is cultivating that relationship and
Right.
stewarding that relationship, making sure that our donors of really time, talent, and treasure are real partners in the work, reporting back, letting them know that, we were able to achieve these goals that we set. And if not, why not? I think we have to do that to build long-term relationships with our supporters. We've got to build a real fundraising plan that's sustainable over time.
Right.
And
Yeah,
that's the way to do that.
yeah, I think one of the things that I've heard from, and it's not, it hasn't just been in this particular race, but from people I've worked with locally and in some of the counties, my experience has been that you can't just bring in somebody to do fundraising for you. You can bring in people to help you manage small dollar sustaining programs. You can bring in people to help you identify possible large donors. But I don't think you can really outsource those asks and that cultivation to some staff person you bring in. So
You're wanting to build long-term relationships.
right, right,
And I think in order to be sustainable, we have to build long-term relationships. Uh,
right,
we've got to find partners that are in it for more than 1 year or one cycle.
right. So moving, from the long-term picture of really rebuilding trust, building those relationships in some places, in some cases, rebuilding them. Um, how would you approach like your first 100 days, your first month? What do you think would be your focus should you get elected?
You know, I have that on my website, like the first 60 days, it's
Okay.
on patsyandtexas.com. One, I would start with the members of the State Democratic Executive Committee. I think we need to retreat together in order to build a team, build one team. It's my sense that that focus on the SDEC has not taken place in,
Well, certainly not in my time.
yeah. And we can't expect to be all reading from the same hymn book if we don't even have the same hymn book.
Right.
So I'd start with that. Same thing with our county chairs. They are the folks who are doing the hard work on the ground. We need to, be clear, build relationships, set expectations, be transparent, and really build a relationship with our county chairs. We've got to I think we have to begin and complete, actually, in the first 30 days, if we can, a 360 review of staff leadership.
Mhm.
I think that's critical and probably should be started before this chair race is is even decided, because it's less than 600 days to the next election.
Right.
We've got to turn our focus to building a plan on how we win that election. And then at the same time, I would really like to build a communications plan to start by telling Texans exactly what these Republicans are doing to destroy their lives. And we've talked about that, I think, earlier today. But I think it is critical that we put the Republicans in Texas on the defense right now. And we can do that by using all channels and by telling in plain language what is happening to their lives on a daily basis by the folks who have power in the state right now.
Right. Yeah, I had an interesting conversation with one of the candidates earlier this week, who is mainly running on a platform of a number of specific issues that they thought the party ought to champion. Um, I thought, well, that's all well and good. Not particularly how I would run, but everybody makes their own choices.
Yeah.
But in talking about communications, I've been on the state party's press release, emails, and other communications for it's probably back since my early days as county chair. My impression is they don't do that bad. I mean, it kind of damning with faint praise, but they don't do that bad with, with the issues they're addressing or how they talk about them. But you never hear about it or see about it in the media, which I think is not surprising, given that, if we can compare ourselves to the opposition, when was the last time anybody remembers hearing what the chair of the Texas Republican Party said? Can you even tell me who this person is? I mean, the chief spokespersons for the party tend to be candidates and office holders. So that's this kind of a two-part question. One is, given the fact that the media is not our friend, the media likes to cover the horse race if they cover anything, and that there are different types of leaders for the party. We have maybe the more introverted, quiet functionaries versus the more extroverted um, cheerleader types. How do you think we overcome some of these communications problems, and how would you approach your role as kind of the public spokesman for the party, as for as much as that position is worth?
Yeah, yeah. Um, well, I would approach it in a couple of different ways. One, I would make sure that first of all, we got to start with the right message, and it has to be a compelling message. I don't think we can ignore traditional media. So we need to keep putting, those press releases out, and the party chair needs to be ready to stand up and communicate the message when it's appropriate. I also think we can lift our elected officials up right now who are standing up on issues they care about. I think that's one of the things that the party can do, is to work with our experts in certain areas and work with folks who have a constituency that want to hear from them. So I don't think the leader of the party has to be the spokesman every time. I think the leader of the party needs to be ready and available when it's appropriate. And then I think we've got to look at all the places that Texans are consuming the news.
Mhm.
And we have got to have a communications plan that reaches folks where they are. where they're consuming their news. One of the things on my website that I propose is building a creators council where we can work with influencers to make sure they have all the information they need to reach their very broad audiences. And having them as spokesman, if you will, for the issues that Democrats care about, um, I think would do a great job of reaching a much broader audience than simply sharing a press release with the press and our supporters.
Right.
We've got to meet people where they are, and we've got to be very focused on building a plan to do that.
Yeah, I think that idea of a creators council is one that I hope whoever gets elected will take up and run with because it
Uh-huh.
seems like something we don't really where we have a hole right now, I'll put it right now. I
Yeah.
know the
Yeah.
comm staff has kind of talked around it, but not really put that kind of focus on it. One of the things that I think is somewhat bedeviled a lot of us working at the county level, on local races from, county commissioner, state rep, state senate, is um, I think there's been kind of a void in, we talk about messaging. It seems that a lot of the candidates, unless they are directly, one of the targeted races for the House Democratic Campaign Committee or the Senate counterpart, they're kind of on their own as far as messaging, collateral, the look of their collateral. Um, and some of them don't even put Democrat on their signs and stuff. Given that they're all going to run their own thing ultimately, it's ultimately the responsibility of the candidate. What incentives can you see? How can you think, what ways can you think the state party can make it easier for them to come up with a message that sells in their area? What kind of help do you think we can provide them on that they would be more inclined to take than ignore? Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I think I see the role of the state Democratic Party is one of the key things that we have to do is to get out the base voters um, across the state. Particularly if we're going to, ever win a statewide race, we've
Yeah,
got
that
to
seems to be where we fell down quite a bit this last election.
Well, and I think we've got to be laser focused on that is our role. And if we can commit as a party to doing that in more legislative districts around the state, um, and share the message that we've heard from voters resonates with their voters, um, I think we'll have lots of partners. We've got to start all over this state by listening to our voters first. Uh,
Right.
we need to not take the word of the consulting cartel.
That's been a
We
real common complaint among some of the people I know who've been in this a while.
Yeah, yeah. We have gotten away from our voters and what they think and how they feel. And I believe we have taken them for granted. And so we've got to start by listening to our voters. And then we build a message that resonates with them. And if we can commit to, the things I think we could do is mass produce collateral material
Mhm.
that if the party can't pay for it, would certainly cost a candidate less
Mhm.
than uh, producing them individually, county by county or district by district.
Yeah.
Um, Again, technical support for our county parties, um, making the van usable by everyone and insisting that everyone use it so that it will be more up to date and effective. Those are the things that I think the state party can do that can help candidates, whether they're in districts that are purple, red, or blue.
Right. Okay. Uh, we're getting close to the end of the hour that we had allocated. I did want, before we close, want to ask a little bit about support for county parties.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I know you don't have much direct experience with this, but I'm sure from your conversations with county chairs and other activists, SDC members, the counties kind of roughly fall into three categories. You have your large urban counties, Dallas and Harris especially, where, I was kind of corrected on this in one interview I did earlier that my comment based upon my work off and on with Dallas County through a couple of county chairs there is more than anything, they just like the state party to stay out of the way. I was reminded that the state party has been very helpful on things like vote by mail programs, and they have worked
Mm-hmm.
very well with the county PERS on that. So I kind of stand corrected on that. But I think it's obvious they don't need the same kind of help that the smaller rural counties do, where you can have an executive committee meeting around your kitchen table. You know, um, and then you kind of have the in between counties like Collin, Denton, Williamson, Fort Bend, where you the population somewhere between 500,000 and a little over a million. They may be blue, they may be red, they may be purple, but they're not the huge counties where they're kind of self-sufficient, but they do a lot in terms of supporting precinct chairs, being able to run the van by themselves, maybe even hiring staff than the smaller counties do. So it's really a continuum of needs that some of them all have, but there's very distinct needs across the different groups. So I know you were aware, you mentioned that we have a county services department now. How do you see the best way that we can really support this variety of counties? Not, that's not even talking about regional differences.
Right.
So how do you think the state party can best support the county parties in their work?
Well, I think the state, first of all, I think we have to take a 254 county approach
Right.
to winning elections. I think we can't ignore um, rural counties anymore. Um, that's the first thing.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's kind of what I was preaching in my county, that we can't ignore any precinct.
exactly, exactly. Um, I think the state party needs to at least double the budget for county party support.
Mhm.
I think asking one individual to build a program and help our party chairs implement it in 254 counties is a recipe for disaster. It's
Right.
asking too much of one person. I think if you've got one staff member, all they can do is react to the fires in 254 counties.
Yeah. I think folks might have mentioned this to you, but one of the things that came out of the post 2020 election analysis was the state party hired what they called a number of regional political managers. Kind of the intent was good,
Yeah.
I think, but the way it actually got implemented had a lot of problems. Uh, some of us had suggested before this was created that we really needed something like a virtual executive director that would serve a number of smaller counties. For example, yeah, you may have a smaller county where you really don't have any van experts, so that virtual executive director could, run the walk list, run the call list, help with setting up fundraising events and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it turned into more of an advisory role and kind of an interface between state party staff and county party activist, which really wasn't what anybody intended anyway.
Yeah.
Plus, in the early days of the program, they kept rotating. One person was covering a fourth of the state, and then they were down to 15 counties, which was great for this person who had that same person throughout the cycle. But the others had, two or three different people they needed to talk to through the cycle. So, in order to avoid a problem like that, how would you go about creating a program that really worked better?
Well, one of the things that I've heard about that program was the people that were hired were not necessarily from the part of the state that they
Yeah. Hmm.
were to be working with. So I would start with that.
Hmm.
I would try to hire someone who knew something about the communities they were working with.
Like somebody who lives in Palestine or Terrell or someplace like that ought to serve as East Texas, et cetera.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, so that's one thing. I think the other thing that the state party can do with our smaller and mid-sized counties is provide technical support.
Mm.
Like, some counties don't have a checking account or an EIN.
Oh, that's true.
The state party could facilitate making that happen. And I think, for transparency, it is important, frankly, that does happen.
Right.
I think the state party could provide maybe a federated website where
Yeah,
if
there was something that was actually mentioned at a comms committee meeting that I sat in on in December. But since we got a changeover in the comm staff, I don't know if that's going to happen or not. I mean, I even volunteered to help with it, but
yeah, yeah. So I think that's something that the state party could do.
okay.
I think the state party could build templates for collateral material
Mm.
that could be personalized, if you will, for the part of the state or the county that it's going out in. Bits of it could be, the bulk of it would be standardized. Certainly, we, having one entity doing that rather than 200 is
Right,
going to be a cost savings.
right,
And also, it's going to standardize the message,
right.
which I think is important. I think we talked about, I think we could print some collateral in bulk at the
Right.
state party and do it much cheaper than individual counties do it. Uh,
Yeah, something that we ran into was a little bit down in the weeds, but my county was the only county in the area that had decided to become a federal PAC. So there were a half dozen, 6 or 8 counties who went to us for presidential campaign signs, which seems to be something the state party ought to be doing since the
uh-huh.
campaigns don't do it. But what has happened is that what the state has done has been kind of too little too late usually.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I think if we have more staff focused on county parties, I
Mm.
think if we really build a centralized system, we can save money and
Mm.
help counties have a more uniform message, and these smaller counties help them begin to build a presence. I think the average Democratic vote share in rural counties is 13%.
Mm.
Uh, we can do better than that.
Right,
We can't, and we don't have to win statewide, but we have to do better.
right.
And it seems to me that the state party can facilitate that.
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard complaints that in some past cycles, some county chairs from smaller counties were told, we can put more resources into the urban counties and have bit greater payback than we can in the rural counties. And I, I I'm sure you agree with me that that's kind of wrong-headed thinking. Um, I did have one other thing that popped into my head when during an earlier discussion on a topic that I'd like to run by you before we finish up. One of the many things that came out of the post 2020 election review was a proposal. We actually had it budgeted, but never spent the money. That an outside consultant, that facilitator, made the
Mhm.
recommendation that we do an in-depth research project across the state. She had called it a social science project, but
Uh-huh.
it's really a research project to talk to voters, talk to residents, and find out what issues really were actually important to the residents and voters of the state. And if you follow on with that, it would be not just what's important, but how to talk about them, which is the language is also important too. So that didn't happen. You had kind of mentioned earlier about, making sure we have the right message. What do you think of that idea, and how big a priority would you place on it?
I think since 2020, there are other groups that are doing that.
Hmm.
The Agave Fund is doing, I think, quarterly polling now.
Okay.
Uh, and so I think we ought to take a look at that and see if that's something we could, benefit from and wouldn't want to sort of duplicate efforts.
Right. Okay.
But I think also we could be deploying our precinct chairs to gather that information.
Right.
And I think that I would think that would be welcome by the precinct chairs in lots of areas where we're going out, building a team to knock on doors and ask voters what they think. And then report back through the structure that we have built and need to strengthen at our party so that we're sort of disintermediating, right? We're
Mhm.
taking the middlemen out and hearing directly from the people what is important to them.
You're right.
And I think that's an approach we really ought to take a hard look at.
Okay, that makes sense. One of the things that I don't think anybody has really put it in quite these terms, using these words, but one of the things that I'm kind of picking up from most of the candidates for state chair is, as much as anything, we need kind of a culture shift at the state party that is, I don't know quite how I would characterize it, but it may be more grassroots driven, more collaborative. You know, a lot of the criticism I've heard is, there's that group of staff down in Austin, and we don't feel we're connected with them or even with the state party. So it, I'm kind of getting the same feeling from you without really calling it a culture shift.
Oh, I call it a culture shift. Absolutely. Uh, yeah, we have got to build a culture focused on what it takes to beat Republicans. And we have got to lift our party leaders, and that's the members of the SDEC, up as experts on how we move forward to win elections. And of course, you as members of the SDC are know what's going on in your communities.
We would hope so.
And if you don't, we need to build a culture where our SDEC members know that that's an expectation.
Right.
But I am hearing, from a lot of SDEC members that even in this chair election, they want to represent the interests of the communities they represent.
Right.
So you know what? That's a step in the right direction.
Right.
And it's certainly a good step to build on.
Right.
That's why, I talked earlier about in the first 60 days that we have a retreat with our SDEC members. And the reason for that is to begin to shift that culture.
Right. Okay, then. Well, I think we're about at the end of the time we had allocated. What else would you like to offer as a closing word?
Well, thank you for doing this,
Oh,
and
thank
thank you
you.
for doing it 2.5 times, Mike. I really appreciate and have enjoyed the opportunity to visit with you. You know, there are a few things I think that set me apart from the other candidates, and I think every candidate um, is doing this because we all want good things for the people of Texas. Um, but this isn't a popularity contest. This
Well,
is
unfortunately, it may be, but it's
it's
politics.
it's politics, but you know, it's an election about who can work within a complicated and fractured democratic ecosystem to build an organization and to fund it uh, so that we can win elections and take power in the state in order to have policy that reflects our democratic values. There are a few things that set me apart from my colleagues in this project. One, I have run a statewide organization. And that means I have relationships all over the state and outside the state. Um, I know how big this state is. I know what it takes to run a statewide organization, and I am ready to do that. Two, I have extensive fundraising ability, and that means I know how to make a plan, to raise money, to execute that plan. And I am willing and ready to go talk to people, to ask them to donate to the Texas Democratic Party so that we can build the programs to win elections. And finally, you know, I'm not a consultant. I don't have a contract. I if I am elected, you know that my only interest is frankly beating Republicans and building
Right.
an organization to do that. And I am ready to give 1000% of myself in order to build a great Texas Democratic Party. So I'd love to have your support. I'd love to have everyone who's watching support my efforts to become party chair. I'd love to work alongside you as we uh, work to win elections.
Well, great. Thanks very much again for your time. And I'll see you in Austin in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mike.
Take care.
Bye.